Hello to all of you people out there online. My name is Frank Albas. I'm the publisher of the Divine Will books and have been for the last 4 to 5 years. I sent out a newsletter about 10 days ago offering to hold meetings nationwide on the Divine Will. And I'm looking for people who are generous, who would like to spread the Divine Will. It's a special mission from God to host meetings in your area. And I will eventually come there, but first I will concentrate on the Miami area, Fort Lauderdale. I'm going to do a presentation. I'll give you a taste of it right now. First, I want to give you a little background on Luisa Picaretta, the most extraordinary soul that lived on earth after the Virgin Mary. Luisa was born on Divine Mercy Sunday, or what turns out to now be Divine Mercy Sunday, the first Sunday after Easter. She was born with her feet coming out first, and she was born without giving any pains to her mother. Her mother gave birth without any pain whatsoever, and Luisa's father was so impressed with this that he immediately, with his wife, went to have her baptized at their local parish in Corrado, Italy, the city where she lived. Luisa was one of 5 girls, 5 sisters, and Luisa was given the grace to meditate for periods of 3 hours after communion. She experienced supernatural revelations and visions at a very early age. But at the age of 17, she was on the balcony of her home getting fresh air, and she saw a vision of Jesus carrying the cross and being dragged by soldiers and a huge crowd. And Jesus looked up at her on the balcony and said, "Soul, help me." And that was the beginning of Luisa becoming a victim soul, a soul who freely offers herself to suffer for the salvation of other souls. And she actually wanted to become a nun, and Jesus had told her she would be a nun, but Jesus had a different understanding of what a nun meant. He said, "You're going to be the true nun of my heart." In fact, it turned out she was cloistered more than any nun. Jesus made her suffer an illness that had no physical explanation, and she remained in bed for 64 years without eating or drinking. When her confessors tried to make her eat, she would obey, but promptly would regurgitate everything, entire and whole, as if she had not chewed it, and exuding a perfume. And she also was given the gift of the stigmata, but at her request, they were not visible. She didn't want anyone to see them. She was so modest. And at the age of, I believe, 23 or maybe 24, she was given the gift of the Divine Will. In fact, Blessed Trinity, she saw them actually enter into her soul, inside of her, and take their residence. And they actually said they were going to be a permanent resident in her soul. And she could feel Jesus move around inside of her. And I guess that's a sign that you really have the gift of the divine will. Now, let me explain what the gift of the divine will is. In order to get this gift, Jesus says there are certain requirements. The first requirement is to be very intensely devoted to acquiring this gift. You must really want it with all your heart and soul. And then the second requirement is that you actually do the Prevenient Act, which is the first act you do in the morning when you get up. You tell Jesus you want to live in His divine will the whole day. And you place all of your acts for the whole day in His will. And then the second part is to actually do actual acts all day long. The more acts you do, the larger the circle of light of God widens in your soul. And it makes you want to more and more live in His will. Not to act alone, but to fuse your acts with Jesus. Invite the divine will to come in each act you do. And you can do this just by saying, Jesus, I place this act in your divine will. Jesus, drive with me while I'm driving. Jesus, do the dishes with me while I'm doing the dishes. You invite Jesus in every act you do, so that the two acts become one, and Jesus becomes the main actor. It's like two candles being put together, and when you put them together, the flame becomes one flame. Now, this is a state higher than the mystical marriage that some other saints have experienced, like Saint Catherine of Siena and Saint Teresa of Avila and others. This is the highest state one can attain on earth. It is a state in which you live heaven on earth, but you don't have the beatific vision. And this doesn't mean you won't have suffering, but suffering is part of the purification that Jesus tries to work inside of your soul. He makes you advance through a series of tests and trials and tribulations. But once Jesus teaches you how to love suffering because of its great value, suffering or the cross is the royal way to heaven. It's the coins that circulate in heaven, the money that is used in heaven. Anyway, the third thing you have to do to live in a divine will is to gain as much knowledge of living in a divine will as you can. And you can only do this by reading and rereading the 36 volumes that Louisa wrote with Jesus. Actually, Jesus does most of the talking. It's actually a two-way conversation between Jesus and Louisa. And Jesus even inspires Louisa to ask certain questions. A lot of it is a question and answer session. And this was almost on a daily basis. Jesus would come to see her. And Jesus put her in bed with this mysterious illness, in which times she would be in a state of immobility. She could not move, because he wanted her all to himself so that they could write this diary. She calls it a diary, the 36 volumes on how to live in a divine will, and what it is, in all of the fine points of living in a divine will. And also she wrote, of course, the hours of the Passion, which is the last 24 hours of Jesus' life, where he gives the details of what he suffered, but mainly he gives the interior life he had during the last 24 hours, his prayers, his thoughts, and we are urged to read these regularly and meditate on Jesus' sufferings, and that we can save our cities and towns, or at least save it in part, when the major chastisements will come to the earth. But right now you can alleviate punishments by these prayers. And a lot of people take an hour each day to read their part, and they form 24-hour clocks. So, and also the Virgin Mary came and dictated her own book on how to live in a divine will, and the steps that you move forward in acquiring the divine will. And she insists that it's so important that you place all acts in the divine will. She said it would be better to die than to do an act not in the divine will. That it's such a big loss, because one act in the divine will is worth more than all human acts in history in the eyes of God. Yeah, that's so important to gain the knowledge. And that's why it's important to form groups where you can read the divine will together and comment on it and grow in knowledge that way. So I deeply encourage everyone to try to get together with others in their area to form a divine will group and meet like once a week for 2 hours, and try to grow in the knowledge of the divine will. Now, the last thing is Jesus, he's so enthusiastic about you living in a divine will. He's more interested than you are. He's willing to even fill in for you the acts that you haven't done, that you forgot, as long as it's not intentional. He will fill in for you. He will do it for you. And but first, before you get the gift, you've consecrated yourself to the divine will, and you're living only in what's called a temporary state of living in a divine will. You're not fully in a divine will. You place an act in a divine will, and as soon as the act is finished, you're out of the divine will until you place the next act in the divine will. So that's just temporary living in the divine will. When Jesus says that he sees that you're really serious about living in the divine will, and that you're placing the minimum required number of acts each day, he will give you the gift on a full-time basis. Now, this is the same gift that Adam and Eve had before the fall. The Divine Trinity lived in Adam and Eve fully, and every act they did was perfect and pleased God perfectly and gave him perfect glory. which is the purpose for which we were created, was to give God full glory. And we can only do this by living in a divine will, because we are doing divine acts. When we do an act with Jesus in His will, He gives us the reward of a divine act. His act with us makes it divine. We're always nothing. And so I would like to go throughout the United States, and especially here in Florida, to teach the divine will. This is just a little primer, a little beginner for you, this video. So I'd like you to email me or call me at 305-864-1683. That number again, 305-864-1683. Or you can email me at FJ Albas, ALBAS, at AtlanticBB, that's a B, like Bob, .net. That email again is F like Frank, J like James, Albas, ALBAS, at Atlantic like the ocean, BB like boy, .net. So all of the groups, the Marian groups especially, like what is the name of the, well, whatever, all the Marian groups especially, I invite you to call me. Those who organize the meetings, whatever, get in touch with me, and I'd be glad to come over to your church or your home to hold meetings, whether it's 3 people or 10 people or 20 people or 50 people, or even if you can organize a whole hall full of people, 300. Get in touch with me. I am full of zeal to spread the divine will. Actually, God is suffering every minute because we are not living in His will. The whole purpose for creating us was for us to live in His will. He loves us so much, He wants to be part of every act we do. It's like a married couple. You do things together, you live together. He wants to live as one with us because He loves us so much, and because He can do prodigies when we call on Him. He's not interested in human acts. They don't impress Him. He wants His own things, divine acts. So if you want to help save the world, help save your soul, first of all, and reach out to other people with this knowledge, offer yourself as a host for a meeting. It's very simple. Just invite a few friends and neighbors, and get in touch with me, especially the Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale area. All right, so I'll end on this note. I'll be expecting to hear from you. This is an urgent appeal. Jesus wants this more than anything. And He wants you to be happy on earth. He made us to be happy. And you are only truly happy when you're with Jesus, because Jesus is the way to happiness, life, and holiness. God bless you all, and please let me hear from you. God bless, in the divine will, of course. Bye now.